This is Captiva in Conversation, your space for impactful and psychologically safe dialogue. We turn internal discussions with our people into useful lessons for the wider world, all centred on your development and finding new ways to grow. I'm Dane Carton, Head of Tuition at Captiva Learning, and I'm joined today by my wonderful colleagues Alison, Holme and Nicola. Today, we're going to explore careers, information, advice and guidance using anecdotes and examples from our different career paths and journeys to hopefully offer you some snippets and some lightbulb moments around where you may want to take your careers. Thank you both for joining me, and really look forward to sharing our ideas during this podcast. So, first key question. So, would you mind kind of briefly sharing your career journey up until this point? And then also, if you're able to, elaborate on what the biggest turning points in your career progression have been. I'm going to start with yourself, Alison, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Dane. So I guess my route into teaching and leadership is fairly unconventional. So I did a degree and went into a graduate management program, moved around a little bit until I was 26. And I hadn't really found my place in the world, I suppose you could say. But I did find myself being drawn to training others, getting bigger into facilitating workshops. So I kind of felt that there was this inner teacher that I hadn't really tapped into. So it was a real, I guess, turning point for me when a friend informed me that you can go and start teaching in a further education college. If you're teaching adults or 16 and above, they'll welcome you with open arms with a vocational subject into a college. And there's lots of large further education colleges up and down the country. And what they do is they take you because of your vocational expertise, and then you do your initial teacher training in the evenings. And that's what I did. And I did an evening class at a level 3 teaching qualification. Absolutely loved it. Then enrolled on a level 4 and a level 5. And one of those was on a Saturday morning, actually, which I look back and think, why on earth was I doing that on a Saturday morning in my 20s? But I realised I'd found something that I was quite passionate about. So I ended up with fractional teaching hours at various different colleges, doing my night school stuff. Then at age 26, I actually converted those qualifications into a PGCE in post-compulsory education training. So, and that was at Southampton University. So I was working in a college. I went from lecturer to team leader to a quality partner to head of department. And yeah, I finally embraced the inner teacher in me that I'd denied was there, I think, for the first 26 years and never looked back, really.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alison. That's really fascinating. Nick, similar story or different?
Oh, yeah, I was just really listening to that. I love that, Alison. Just not a conventional route, but just that real passion for teaching that you found along the way. And I'd say it's similar but different. So I came to teaching almost just by accident. It was one of those moments, you get to 18 and it's like, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I mean, you speak to most 18-year-olds these days, they don't really know. And what I did understand about myself was that I loved being around children and I could really connect with them. So hence then, didn't you remember the days when you were, I think, was it 15 and you did some work experience and it was in an office? It's like, nah, I'm not doing that. Got some in a school and it was like, yes, this feels like this is going to be the right environment for me. So I then took the traditional step of once I'd done A-levels, went and did a 4-year B.Ed in Bristol and very sort of quickly found that it was something that I was really good at. I just loved being with children. I think children are the sort of the little humans, the ones that I really connected with more than anything. And then sort of for many years just became a really sort of good classroom practitioner. Then developed into subject leadership and then on into senior teacher and leadership roles as head of school and then on into headship for a short while. And that evolving picture of wanting to, and this is similar to Alison, knowing that you can make a difference, that became the bigger people, so it expanded out to development of people, not just children, because I knew that I could impact children more widely if I was able to develop the adults and the team around me too. And that's sort of been my passion ever since in one guise or another. And for me, a sort of pivotal turning point was completing the level 7 leadership apprenticeship and the masters that went alongside the applied leadership and management masters. I think it was singularly the most significant career-based professional development that I did, and I was really lucky enough to complete. It really opened my eyes to the world beyond education, because when you're in education, you'll know, Dane, you tend to be in your own little bubble. But it was like, all of a sudden I had access to the science of business and how that could apply to education, how you could really shake things up. I went on my own personal discovery as well about who I am and why I am the way I am, and understood within the context of some of the sort of teaching and learning from that course how important it is to know you before you can know others and before you can lead others and build an organization. And that was such an enlightening moment, because as a child I had a really rocky ride through education. Did not suit me. I was a real square peg in a round hole, and it was the first time that I felt like I was a success rather than a failure all the time. So the apprenticeship I would never have considered before. It just happened to be something that came into my inbox one day. There it was, and I just thought, maybe there is an opportunity there. And one thing led to another, and here I am at Captiva, because I was so moved by what it had done for me that I wanted to be able to share that with other leaders in schools, knowing how tough it is on the ground, how striving most of them are, how at the core of that they just want to make a difference. And I just thought maybe I could be someone who could help them do that. So again, developing people has gone beyond the boundaries of a traditional four walls of a school. It's I've taken it more broadly now across the sector. Yeah, and so it's been a special journey.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. I'm not going to add anything to that because that was perfect. And if we think about the range of different apprenticeships that we have under our umbrella at Captiva, all the way from level 3 to level 7, what do you see as the most important next steps for them as they are at the different stages of their apprenticeship journey? I'm going to start with yourself this time, Nick.
I'd say that the sort of learning community that you find yourself in is a really good place to begin to build a network and establish relationships. And that sort of, cross-sector intelligence that's out there that you can really begin to hook into and learn from others, and use that to be able to, really evolve your practice, bring it back to your own organizations. It's really about making connections with other people, raising your sort of professional profile within your industry, and seeing then what new career opportunities might come along. Because we tend to, if we're not careful, stay in our silos. I'd be encouraging people, whatever level that they're working at and whatever apprenticeship, to really grasp these opportunities with different people, learn from one another, and then see how you can widen your skills and your knowledge and your understanding and your behaviours that you would apply to your apprenticeship. But more importantly, what that would do for you in terms of development within your own role, and where you might see your next role taking you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick. Alison, what's your thoughts on that?
In terms of next steps, well, two thoughts really. I think if you've got a personal development plan, it's about revisiting that so that it wasn't just a tokenistic thing when you did it originally. I know a lot of people do it at the beginning of an apprenticeship, but revisiting it and updating it and constantly thinking, what do I need to add to it? Because I know for years people have said to me, what do you want? What do you want to do? Even when I got divorced, what do you want with the rest of your life? And they're big questions and they're really difficult to answer. It takes me a long time to reach a conclusion. But I do think of something like a personal development plan. And as I said, not just tokenistic. But if you haven't got that and you don't have the answers, I guess what I've always done is just worked hard and kept my options open. And, going back to my younger days, that I did a degree in combined subjects because I couldn't decide on a particular subject to do my degree in. So I even 30 years ago, they did combined subject degrees. So I did marketing and law and psychology in the first year, and then it dropped to marketing and law in the second year. And only in the third year did I specialise because I didn't want to be pigeonholed. And I think with qualifications, there's new apprenticeship standards coming out all the time. and new things like T levels. There's so much more choice. So if you have a plan, explore those choices. If you haven't got a plan, keep it broad, keep your options open.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. And similarly, quite linked actually to that question, I feel, is the idea of skills gaps. So it's a two-part question. One, how can apprentices recognize those skill gaps and start to close them? And what role does feedback and reflection play in that development? Alison, I'm going to start with yourself this time, please.
Okay, so I think apprentices recognizing skills gaps, I think it's about asking for feedback from those around you, line managers, colleagues, mentors, friends in the workplace, because it's not always easy to see those gaps for yourself. Sometimes you've got to open yourself up to a bit of feedback. And if you find that, your line manager needs to support you by creating opportunities for development, giving you opportunities that you wouldn't normally come across in your daily, day-to-day, week-to-week, then don't be afraid to ask for that support, ask for those opportunities. And yeah, it's a bit linked to my last answer, isn't it? Keeping it broad, keeping your options open, dip your toe in and have different experiences and see where it leads.
Amazing. Thank you, Alison. Nick, similar ideas there or slightly different?
Yeah, no, I was going to say similarly. So feedback for me, I think, is one of the most important sort of vehicles for self-development. But you've got to you've got to reach out and be comfortable and develop relationships with people around you. So I mean, Alison mentioned, looking for opportunities, talking to your line manager. They're definitely the key sort of person in when you're thinking about development. It's a real chance, I think, to be able to reflect on what other people are sort of are giving you, and it's coming your way, so that you can really integrate that into how you see yourself, what your personal strengths are, and where it is you feel that you need to develop, not just in your professional role, but it might cross over into your personal life too. So I mean, it alludes to a question we had earlier about the importance of understanding self. So there are lots of layers to that. But unless you are truly committed to knowing who you are, and you're open to what other people see and can help with the blind spots that you might have, you're not going to be really able to tap into that in the most, I suppose, fruitful way. So it's just building in regular time to be able to do that. It might be that it could link with personal development plans if you're someone who sort of knows where you're going to be going. And then having a regular sort of space that's held so you can be challenged and but asked questions that leads to sort of curiosity and self-discovery, and be able to then really sort of unpack the skills that you've got, where there might be gaps in what you see you're going to need depending on the path that you want to take, or as Alison said, keeping it quite broad, and then maybe sort of coming at it from different angles, and just cultivating that environment where feedback just loops around, so that you're revisiting and looking at where you might have moved forward and where the sticking points might be, and how you're going to find things that are going to enable you to get past stuff that you find quite difficult. And that might be, how you hold challenging conversations, for instance, or time management, or, using your voice confidently in different sorts of situations with different audiences, depending on what your role is. But key to that, I think, is just having a good working relationship, which is hard, isn't it, when you're young and you're stepping out of, into your career at early stages, to find your voice and to feel comfortable inviting feedback and then doing something with it. But it's definitely a game changer, I would say.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. And again, we'll have colleagues and apprentices at varying levels on their career paths and journeys, and some of them may be exploring opportunities either within their organization or in other organizations. So, when we're thinking about that idea of kind of CV or personal statement writing, what would you say differentiates a strong CV from a generic, simplified version? And Nick, I'm going to start with yourself this time.
Well, having gone through a lot of recruitment processes and been on the side of recruiting, I would say it's someone who's really taken the time to research their potential employer, understand who they are, know what their mission, vision, their values are, within the organisation, what really drives them forward, and being able to capture that, embody it, and demonstrate that actually it aligns with who you are, what you're about, and what you know that you can offer. Same with, really beginning to distill it down into your skills, your experience, your expertise, really being able to emulate what it is they're after, and having a really clear understanding from the job specification what it is an employer is after and how it is you can demonstrate it. And not in flowery ways, but being really concise, punchy, giving really good examples of what you've done, why you did it, what happened as a result of it. That really helps you, I think, stand above other people. So it's a willingness to really immerse yourself in what the organisation is truly about, what it is they're after, and how you can align that with what you know about your own expertise, your own vision and values. And I'd say, actually, if you're going for a job at a place where the values don't align with you, don't bother, because that'll come through in your CV. They really want to see someone that sort of marries and mirrors what they're about, and there needs to be a sort of a unity between the two.
Amazing. Thank you, Nick. Alison, yourself?
I think one of the most useful things I learned only in the last few years actually is when you're talking about the previous jobs that you've had on a CV, is to talk about achievements rather than responsibilities. So it's for quite often you've got a bullet point. I was responsible for leading a team of 5. I was responsible for student satisfaction. And actually, if you can put quantifiable, measurable achievements in there, they just jump off the page. And I know for perhaps younger colleagues starting off in their career, it's not always possible, but I'm talking about sort of almost like smart targets. I led the team that over 18 months increased distinction grades by 20%. That's the sort of thing that they really like. And it took me a long time to learn that. So I've implemented that now. And also really what Nick said about real examples to demonstrate your skills. And that will link nicely with if you're successful in an application and then you're preparing for an interview. A lot of the times it's competency-based questions. Can you tell me a time when you did X, Y, Z? So, but by really spending the time on your CV and what you did, you're halfway there to planning your competency-based answers in the interview, I think. But that again that's a whole other question, isn't it? About star narratives and verbalizing star narratives and practicing them in the mirror and, making sure you're not twirling your hair, which I was once told I did, in an online interview. But yeah, I mean, after 30 odd years in the workplace, I don't think anybody could still do a perfect interview. The parameters always seem to be changing. Demands are more and more. They seem to want more and more from you. Just as a slight aside, I was just mentioning to Nick that in my trustee role, I'm going into school this afternoon. I am on annual leave. I'm not pulling a fast one day. I'm the chair of trustees, and my head teacher's retiring, and I have a field of 9 to shortlist to 5 this afternoon with my colleagues, which is going to be a really tough job. But I will say one thing: I've read 9 supporting statements, and the AI ones jump off the page. They jump off the page because they are clearly, it just has responded to everything I wrote in the applicant pack. And I can glance through and go, that one's AI generated. This person has actually taken the time to tell me what I want, but tell me what I want based on their experiences and their examples. And it's really obvious. So I guess my point is, be careful with AI and use it smartly.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really interesting point there, which actually links into what Nick was saying as well, and that idea of being authentic and being your true self. Because if you don't, the facade will come down very quickly, and actually you won't necessarily be happy in a role within an organization where your values don't align. So yeah, I mean, there are some wonderful digital tools out there. I'm thinking of one of our colleagues, Run, who would definitely be saying around utilizing digital assets, but it's always to ensure that it is authentic and honest, because ultimately that's what you need to propose and that's what you need to present forward. So huge thank you to both of you for your interesting insights there. Next, then we're going to look at kind of that career spotlight element. So, thinking about your varied careers up until this point in different sectors and in different organizations, what's one career role that apprentices may not know about your particular field? Alison, I'm going to start with yourself.
Yeah, so I guess we alluded to it actually right at the beginning, because I mentioned that in further education there are various routes to be a qualified teacher learning and skills status. And so I talked about I did a level 3 at night school, level 4 at night school, level 5 and on to a PGCE. Actually, what exists now in the apprenticeship standards space is qualification called the Learning and Skills Teacher, which is the recognised qualification to be competently qualified anywhere teaching post-16 education. Captiva have just launched that course. It started off incredibly successfully, really going back to excuse me, the basics of adult learning, how adults learn, barriers to learning for adults. I mean, it's my passion, as you know, but I think people out there, maybe people working in schools in various capacities, maybe people working in the youth work sector, looking at the teachers and thinking I could do that. And I think Captiva's absolutely fantastically mapped out a suite of qualifications that they could look at progression pathways and look at how am I going to be, how do I get to being that professional qualified competent teacher in that classroom with those young people, with those adults, because it's just an incredibly rewarding career journey. So yeah, I think the fact that you don't have to have a teaching qualification in your back pocket before you start might be something that people aren't aware of.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Alison. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Nick, what's your take on that?
Yeah, not too much to add actually to Alison, but one thing I suppose when I think about my own personal journey that jumps out at me is not knowing back along that there's a defined a role as in the professional development space. So you could be someone who works for a director of a director of institute, for instance, like a part of a teaching college where you are overseeing the different courses that you're offering. That would be an internal offering, or there might be that you have relationships with a wider partners in the sector, and you've got people externally coming in that you're training. I always thought that when you went into education and started off as a class teacher and sort of climbed that pole, that it was phase lead or subject lead, going into more middle leadership, then senior leadership, deputy headship. Before you got to headship, there wasn't back in the day, it didn't really feel like you had different routes that you could explore, and that's really expanded out now. And I think people maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago who were in those roles, it was probably more they just fell into it because an opportunity luckily came their way. But you can, if you're artful about it, you can make that sort of intentional choice earlier on. And so rather than become a leader of a school, say, you could go along the professional development path and occupy that space and and be as game changing and influential in that role as you could be if you're leading a school. So I think had my time again, it's something that I would have explored and would like to have moved into from earlier on. So say like in my 40s and at now 51 heading towards 52, that sort of step change. You never say never, but I don't think it's going to be within my grasp right now. But yeah, it's there'd be a lot of people out there I think would be interested in exploring what that might look like.
And I think what I'm getting from that then is actually to be slightly more strategic in the way that we approach our careers,
Yeah.
and actually recognize that there is a big wide world out there, and
Mhm.
sometimes it takes that kind of initial brave first step to move away from your bubble. Certainly from my own point of view, that was very much, it's quite terrifying moving out of my
Yeah.
relatively safe and secure mainstream role that I had and step into a completely different environment and sector. But it was the best thing I ever did. Not necessarily because my entire career is going to be within this particular sector, but just because it made me realize that there are other careers out there and that you aren't necessarily pigeonholed to one particular career. because of a choice that you made, like you said at the beginning, Nick, when you were 18 years old. And
Yeah.
in my experience, I didn't know any better. I just basically picked the subjects that I was best at school and just followed that route. And then at the end of it, it was like, well, what do I do now? And okay, I'll try teaching, and
Yeah.
found that I had a natural affinity and love for it. But you can feel actually that your pathway is completely laid out for you, and that there's no room for maneuver, or there's no room for flexibility. And actually, I think what you're both really saying there is that there very much is. You just need to think outside the box and start to speak to the right people and explore those different opportunities. Because, particularly in the world that we live within now, with, access to just huge amounts of information and connectivity, actually the sky's the limit in terms of where you might want to go. You just need to start asking the right questions. So I think that's just such brilliant points from both of you. Thank you. And then, oh, go on,
Just add
Alison. Yeah.
to that, Dave. Yeah, no, just saying what you said, it made me think, I probably, like a lot of people listening to this, I've actually been made redundant twice, once in my 20s and once in my 30s. And I'm just agreeing with what you've said about stepping out your comfort zone and taking the time to look at other career paths. But when you've been made redundant, particularly at a younger age, it came out of the blue, you can feel that it's very emotional, it's very personal, it's just really, really difficult. But actually, when I look back, and I know friends have agreed in their own world, this has happened to them. Sometimes being made redundant, it can be the best thing that ever happened to you. And you end up taking a complete pivot in a different industry, a different job role, but because you're forced to take that time to look at yourself and what I enjoy and what I don't. So I guess don't it's easy to say it with hindsight, but if you are in that really difficult situation of you're made redundant, which does happen, we know that further education colleges, universities are really struggling financially up and down the country. But just try and remember your strengths and think that actually maybe something good is around the corner.
I love that, Alison. And it's amazing what you find. We could do an entire podcast series on this topic alone, but it's amazing what you find out about yourself in terms of resilience and that stoicism when you are put in those challenging situations, and actually giving yourself credit for just how wonderful you are and what you have to offer. Sometimes it takes those really difficult moments in life to actually truly reflect and realize that. So I think that's a really powerful point you've raised there.
Any chance I could just add to that as well, Dane?
Of course, absolutely, please do.
It's sort of similar but not. So just listening to both of you, it really sort of sparked me into thinking about how generationally attitudes and perspectives are quite different. So when I think about my own boys and where they've got to and where they might see themselves going, there's this sort of idea that career isn't just you land in one particular job and you stay there and you work your way up. It's quite accepted now that you have like 3 or 4 phases in your life and you'll move from one thing to another, and that being okay. And there's a real sort of acceptance and looseness with that in a way, maybe, that certainly, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, so I don't want to put words or ideas into either of your mouths, but it really sits quite differently to views around what success looked like in a career when I first started out. And whilst I can be a bit of a dinosaur sometimes, actually what I have learned from, just similar to you, Dane, of coming out of school, whilst I'm still doing something and I'm transferring my skills, so it feels like there's some comfort in it, I realised that it's okay to do something that's a bit different. And in the coaching work that I do with leaders, and that again being something very different and not reliable, regular, not a permanent contract. It's going into that space of self-employed. It's that takes quite a lot of bravery and gumption to do that. And I'm not a very brave person, but I'm dipping my toe in and making a start and thinking, well, who knows where that might lead? Because working on a one-to-one and coaching people is where my heart now, at this stage in my life, really, really sits. And I'm quite excited by what might be around the corner if I allow myself the time to think about it and to put some energy into it. And to go back to the networking, and just having your presence out there within that, whatever field it is that you feel you want to sit in, is a way of making some of those links and possibly being able to then follow some of those pathways and see where it might lead you.
which is hugely exciting. I would be slightly provocative there, Nick, and say you have indeed been brave, despite what you think, by even dipping your toe in the market in the first place. And I think, that's the perfect epitome of actually what we're advising our listeners to do, which is just to take that first step. And that leads perfectly, as if by plan, to my final question. And it's really, what message of encouragement for our listeners would you give them as they start to explore this theme and topic? Or what small networking action would you challenge them to complete this week? I'm going to start with yourself, Nick, if that's okay.
Well, I'd say get yourself on LinkedIn, set up a profile, talk about who you are, and start to make connections with people. Anyone that might align with where you see yourself or what you want for yourself, and just then maybe like a post or several posts, then build up your courage into maybe like responding to posts, and just becoming more present in that space, and starting to build up some sort of momentum behind you, a voice, a little bit of influence. Who knows where that might lead to, and the people that you might sort of connect with that you would never have dreamed of rubbing shoulders with, and what that might do for you in terms of career progression, and where you might want to go to future steps.
Thank you, Nick. And yourself, Alison?
And yeah, I think Nick's absolutely beautifully answered the point about networking and LinkedIn, and that's something I try and make myself braver about on a daily basis. I guess I'll go with the encouragement part of your question. So I think I've already sort of said I'm a champion of the non-traditional qualifications out there, many years teaching BTECs and now working in apprenticeships. But there's a lovely story of my best friend's daughter, who, a bit like yourself, Nick, absolutely just loves kids, ended up doing work experience in nurseries and schools. And she did one of the T-levels, brand new T-level to the local college here. Bit of the unknown. There's a real element of work experience within a T-level, as well as the academic side of it. And I was absolutely blown away when I heard that from that T-level, where she got a distinction, she's now doing a BSc in psychology with mental health and counselling and mental health for children at Southampton University. And you just think, there are so many non-traditional routes now to some fantastic careers, apprenticeships being at the heart of that. And I said earlier, new apprenticeship standards coming out all the time. Yeah, I mean, there's a theme here, isn't there? Take the time to think about what's out there. That's what's coming out of this conversation for me. So, but I just think that's just a wonderful story of this girl who did some work experience in a nursery, and I can just see her flying now. She's going to have some massive salary as some sort of childcare mental health advisor for the NHS, a director of all of that. Absolutely amazing career trajectory that she's on. So yeah, incredibly proud.
Brilliant. And I think, what you both alluded to there is start to have the conversations. So, for apprentices that are on our program, reach out to your PLM, have that conversation with them, have a sounding board in that safe space around what your career could look like in terms of next steps. Equally, got to plug, our careers page on Canvas, which is brand new, lots of wonderful website links, interactive activities, as well as webinars and also podcasts with people from different careers and giving insights into their career paths up to this point. So do utilize all of those resources and do make sure that you're proactive. Huge thank you to both of you. Just a fascinating insight into careers, information, advice and guidance, and those next steps that we can start exploring. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed it too. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.